Hiya folks, my name is Adam and I like to make tiny nerdy things, and this video is sponsored by Bandai Namco and their new game, Elden Ring Nightreign. Nightreign is the new 3-player co-op experience by From Software where you and two buds play as one of 8 Nightfarers traipsing around the ever-changing Limveld countryside looking for less friendly friends to befriend via copious smacks with a slew of fun new weapons. Eventually, of course, you'll come face to face with the fabled Night Lords and probably die. Nightreign is available right now, or rather, it will be in 30 minutes from now when you finish this video. Of course, if I'm making a Nightreign sculpture, then I needed to make something that was extra awesome, and there was one scene in particular that tickled my pickle the most in the recent trailers, and it was this fight against a big, 3-headed, sword-swinging good boy named GITDEYES, which I guess means I need to make a dog. Now, the first step in making any 3-headed hound is building a triple vertebrae upon which I can create 3 happy snoots. So I'll cut a triplet of equally sized lengths of wire and tape them together, then wrap them in a layer of bodybuilding aluminium foil, separating the heads into their individual positions before covering everything else in a couple layers of foil. With the body bulked up, I can start adding the legs, 4 of which support the front of GITDEYES with a more standard 2 in the back for balance. I'll then tilt the tri-tipped tail upwards and reposition the dog heads before swatting this thing off my desk because this was all a lie. I actually deleted the original footage of making the armature, but I didn't want to start out already admitting I'm bad at my job, so I did a little dramatic reenactment. Fortunately, that seems to be the only footage missing, so from here on out, I promise this is an honest step-by-step, or mostly. With the actual armature sorted out, I can start bulking out GITDEYES' body in clay, thickening up his back and making sure he, or they, have nice girthy necks before moving on to making my wolf heads. I'll build the beast head by adding some lumpy bits to the top and a goofy soft jaw to the underside that I can then poke and prod into a more lupine look, adding a sharper snout and a more pronounced jawline. Of course, there are 3 heads here, so anything I do to one, I need to make sure I do to all 3. One of the more important points of Nightreign is the day-night cycle, which culminates in a choice of a Night Lord boss at the end of the 3-day run, one of which happens to be our boy GITDEYES here, and being a Night Lord, he has a bit of an affinity for the dark, which is why I made sure that his eyeballs glow in the dark.
Wow.
With his big shiny peepers looking perfect, I can then get to work building up the detail of his happy smiling mouth by building up some gums and filling said gums with lots of friendly head-sized teeth. I'll then slip a tongue into each mouth and add a bit of tonguey detail, but before I can go any further, I need to make his sword. You see, GITDEYES is swinging a big sword which I just now realized might be a literal GITDEYES, which he holds in his mouth when he isn't hurling it across the field at an unsuspecting hero. I'm gonna have him burying the blade in the sand, throwing out gouts of fire though, which means I need to make at least like 60% of the sword so I have something to hand off to one of the heads. So once I've cut and carved the shape and sanded it sharp, I can add a hilt, cleaning up the design so it mimics what's in game before baking it all again, at which point I can remove the handle from the hilt so I can feed it to GITDEYES' center head without having to worry about the rest of the sword flopping around while I work. With that though, I've got the general shape of these dogs done, which means I can start the inferring process, which, in the interest of keeping you interested, I've edited down from roughly 4 hours to just over 12 seconds. However, if you want to watch this sort of thing in real time, you can always watch me through my window. Also, before I can properly finish the inferring process, I'm gonna need to cover the legs in clay to be furred, but before I can do that, I need to finish the 6 furless feet, complete with a full complement of 24 toenails. With the feet looking positively fine, I can finally add the fur to the legs, building up the shape of the legs and blending the clay into the torso, which I've baked at this point to protect the already added fur detail. Then it's back to the inferring, blending the otherwise smooth, hairless legs into the pre-existing furred body. To help give the fur a bit more depth and make it look a bit more raggedy and lupine, I'll add some little blobs around the knees and on the backs of the legs, as well as strategically placed along the chin and anywhere else I think GITDEYES could do with a bit more scruff. I'll add some extra long wormy dealies to his back leading up to the top of each head, as well as along the body in semi-random spots before blending it in and fluffing it up. Some final pinching with some sharp tweezers will add that last bit of detail before moving on to making his spooky masks. To ensure the masks have a form-fitting fit that fits the form of each face, I'll coat the heads in a couple layers of separator which, once it's cured, will let me sculpt the bone masks directly on top of the already cured clay of the face. Once the masks have been baked, I can peel them safely off the snouts and clean up any of the clay that's snuck between the fur before drilling some teeny tiny holes in the top of the masks so I can fit some fine armature wire in that will allow me to make some scraggly horns protruding from the back of the mask. I'll cover the wire with some of the same bone-colored clay I used for the rest of the mask, but before I can reattach said masks, I need to drill some holes in the side of the heads so I can make the wavy fur of the wolf's mane that's tucked under each mask. I'll wrap these rods in some more clay so I can smooth it back and fluff it up so it looks like the long flowing hair rather than the short fur of the body. Then I can press the masks down onto the still soft clay to get a final perfectly fit. Then it's back to the back where I can wrap the rest of the exposed tail wire in a bit more clay and texture this similarly to the flowing hair of the mane. With that, this Tri-Wolf Mega Boss is fully built and ready for a coat of paint. I'll remove the skull caps from the wolf heads and set them aside for now while I coat the fur coat with a fur coat colored brownish blackish color before gently stippling some reds haphazardly around the body where our good boy has a bit of a skin condition. I'll then follow this up with a copious amount of dry brushing with some grays and bone whites to help all that furry texture stand out a touch. Then I can paint all the toenails a charcoal black before heading to the mouths, which will get a couple coats of reds and pinks, while the teeth get a few coats of sepia wash, wiping away any of the excess on the tips. Back to the boneheads, they've already got a pretty good dirty bone white base coat, so I'll just give them an all-over wash with a heavy sepia to add plenty of shading and discoloration, and I can reattach them in their corresponding lupine locations. A last bit of gloss varnish to make the mouth shine, then I'm on to painting Gladius's Gladius, which gets a solid black base coat with a charcoal sponged on top for added texture, before breaking out my shiny gold to add lots of swirls and filigree and fancy gold symbols. Finally, once the sword is looking adequately ostentatious, I can give the whole thing a sponging with some more gold to add a bit of messy, shiny texture. Then I'm on to making the not at all ridiculous chain that Gladius uses to swing his weapon about. I can't help but feel this chain was designed by someone who had a copy-paste tool at their disposal, since each link involves a non-zero amount of fine-tuning. I ended up making my chain by twisting some teeny tiny armature wire into an appropriate shape, smooshing it flat, then connecting it to another link, before repeating this roughly 10,000 more times to make my full-length, game-accurate chain. This chain, of course, needs to be connected to the hilt of the sword so Gladius can swing it about as he pleases, and I need to give the chain a bit of weathering, which I can do by blasting it in several passes with some darker metallic shades before stippling on a bit of rust. Finally, I can fit the hilt into Gladius's mouth and wrap the chain about his body, but with that, this tri-headed good boy is finally built, which means I need to make some heroes. A bit of quick math at the old mathing station meant my little heroes need to be roughly 50 millimeters tall, or for my American viewers, that same amount but in equivalent inches. At this scale, my normal mini armature wire is a bit too flimsy, so instead I'm going to use some paper clips since it's significantly sturdier, and it also means that I can claim paper clips as a tax write-off. Once I've marked out the hip and knee bends, I can bend the wire into a proper position for the first of my heroes before mounting the paperclip on a block of wood and wrapping it in an initial layer of epoxy putty. The putty is much stickier than clay, so it'll hold onto the wire a lot better, and it'll cure by itself, so I can add a layer of clay over top to make the rest of the mini. And while I wait for the green stuff underneath to cure, I'll do the same thing for the other two torso-less hero legs. Otherwise, once the green stuff is cured, I can start building up the first of my heroes, Wilder. I'll start by wrapping his boots in a thin strip of cotton string, building up the top of the boot before wrapping his torso in a long trench coat-esque jacket. I'll then stab a little length of wire through his torso and bend the wire into the position for his arms as he's sprinting towards his destiny, and I can coat the wire in a thin layer of clay, blending it into the body. Using the knurling on my sculpting tool, I can add a bit of texture before building out the armor plate on his upper chest, cutting and carving what little detail these shaky hands can competently add, before I can start wrapping his waist in several little wormy dealies to build up the majority of his belt. With a belt in place, I can add his shoulder pads, of which the left one is built in several layers, while the right one is a bit more simplistic in its design. To make the detailed bit of his vambrace, I pre-baked some thin sheets that I could cut to the correct shape and attach to the model, then wrap in some more clay, poking a little extra detail into the top. Before I go any further though, I need to make a tiny shield for him to hold, which I'll make by cutting a teeny tiny circle out of a sheet of clay and adding just a tiny bit of detail to the front. And while I'm at it, I may as well make his sword as well, since I'll need that at some point too. With the shield baked, I can press it into some sticky tack so I can sculpt a closed fist onto the backside, which I figured is probably easier than trying to do so directly onto the model. This way I could just attach the whole shield onto the arm and blend it in at the source. At this point, I'm just about ready to make his helmeted head, but I want to create the surrounding surface first, so I'll add some little strips down the shoulder and down the back to make his tattered and torn cape, as well as what I can only assume is a fancy fantasy shawl. Then it's on to making his head. The head was truly the most frustrating part of this entire process, and what you see here is really only the first of probably 6 attempts, the last of which ended up being fine. It's fine. It's okay. I don't hate it. At first I was under the impression that making a helmet would be less frustrating than making a face, but for some reason I could not, for the life of me, get it to look like what I wanted. And when I finally did manage it, it was about 50% too large and I had to try again. Regardless, at some point I did manage to make something semi-acceptable so I could press that into place, then fit the sword in place now that I've added a hilt and plenty of weathering and pitting along the blade, and I can build his little hand holding the sword, and that's 1 hero down, 2 to go. My second hero is of course the Archer, aka Iron Eye, as we're going for the holy trinity of dungeon delvers, the sword and board guy, the Archer, and the Bird Man. Iron Eye has a bit less going on and I think the design reads a bit better, but that's probably because I don't think I need to make nearly as much stuff to make it look right. I'm not saying I'm lazy, I'm just saying my love of character design can be pretty heavily affected by just how much detail I have to recreate. With his boots and pants built, I can cover his torso in a strapless summer dress, then poke it with a flat, chopped down stir stick to create the layered plates of his armor, using a smaller stir stick to create the squares. Then I'll wrap his torso in a teeny tiny string belt before building up his shoulder plate and his little fists, which will be pulling the string of a massive bow taut. I can clean up his gloves, then wrap the left fist with the base of the bow before building up the base of his cape, starting with the best head of the 3 heroes, a faceless cowled hood. This gets the same squares and rectangles texturing, then I'll drape a cape over his back, fit it to his form, and poke it with my stir sticks. A little noodle draped over his shoulder will allow me to attach a smaller bow that I built from a smooshed armature wire as well as an oversized quiver, and I can make some teeny tiny feathers by pinching some super fine armature wire with my pliers. These little feathers can get fit into the opening of his hood, and I can get on to making that aforementioned oversized bow. I've made a top-heavy clay parentheses that I can wrap a bit of wire around to create a bow being pulled taut, then I'll wrap a center brace around the center before bracing it with more clay and adding some wrapping around the middle. Finally, to make my oversized arrows, I'll take a little sheet of aluminium mesh and cut it down to a single set of diamonds in a row that can be glued onto a teeny tiny length of wire, which I'll then drop into the quiver before adding a slightly longer one to my archer's fingers and along the bow, which I've added to the base that I sculpted to his hand earlier. With that, we are 2 down and just the Birdman left. The Birdman, also known as Guardian, is, I think, the most intriguing of the heroes because he's a bird, and I happen to be a big fan of birds. In fact, I think my neighbors hate me because the first thing I did when I moved in was set up bird feeders to attract all the pigeons in the neighborhood, and now they've flocked to our home singing the cooing song of their people at all hours of the day. Once I've built the underlying tattered and torn outfit, I can set him aside and build his battle axe, starting with the head that I'll make in much the same manner as the shield, cutting the shape out of a little circle before baking it and gluing it onto a length of wire so I can sand it into a slightly sharper miniature poleaxe. I love that the bird character chose the axe with feathers, so I made sure to include them in the sculpt. Then once I've added a bit more filigree and detail, I can bake it while I add some armature wire to Guardian's upper torso and bend those arms into an overhead swing that I can then wrap around the handle of the axe. With the axe in place, I can start to wrap the arms in clay, building the hands directly onto the handle, adding furry bird texture to the arms before adding his vambraces. I can then build up the torso plates before breaking out some more of that miniature aluminum mesh to cut out some larger sections that will work as the web-like armor plates that Guardian wears in lieu of larger, chunkier, and presumably heavier armor. Once I've added a longer strip around his waist, I can get on to making his head, which is, appropriately, an eagle head, and it ended up being both satisfying and simple to make, at least when compared to Wilder's helmet. This head only took 2 tries before I made it the correct size. A little poking and pulling with a ball stylus will add the feathery texture to the head, and I can press it down onto the top of the torso before adding some little shoulder pads. By wrapping the mesh around a ball stylus, I can get a nice rounded plate that will wrap around the shoulder. Then once I've built up the big chest plate on Guardian's chest, I can add the final shoulder plate and any of the remaining metal bits, as well as some feathers sticking out his butt. Guardian isn't wearing boots because birds don't wear boots, so I need to make some talons instead, and to keep them from being too flat, I'll sculpt them out of green stuff using a ball stylus. Green stuff is like a plastic when it cures, so it should be a bit more robust than clay. And once it's had 24 hours to cure, I can peel it off the ball, clean up the excess, then attach them to the legs. I made some teeny tiny talons to stick onto the tips of the bird toes, then a bit of cleanup to blend it all together, and I can set Guardian aside while I make his wings. To make said wings, I've made a wavy clay form and coated it in non-stick separator so I can press a thin sheet of clay onto the surface and cut out the shape of the wing using an appropriately sized stencil. Then with the stencil removed, I'll start marking out the feathers by cutting steps into the wings, working my way from one side to the other, pushing and pulling until I've got some nice rounded, feathery looking lumps that I can then start adding the feathery detail onto. Once I've got the first layer of the wing built, I'll add a second layer on top of that and do the same wing thing before baking it and peeling it off the block so I can attach a mounting wire along the top and cover the backside in a very thin layer of clay, into which I can carve some more feathers. Finally, with the front and back built up, I can add the top layer of feathers flopping over both sides, then I can bake it and repeat this entire process to make a second wing before attaching them to Guardian's back. And with that, the Birdman is built and ready to be added to his fellow trio of heroes, meaning that it's time to paint these guys, which I can do by priming them black, followed by a heavy zenithal highlighting with white, which should, I hope, make it a little bit easier to paint these guys. Now, being a creature of habit, I'll go back to the first hero and start there by painting Wilder's coat blue and his boots and belt and cape a couple coats of dark brown. I'll then tackle the metal bits of his armor with some steel. Then I can paint the wood of his shield brown with lighter brown streaks so it looks a bit more woody, before adding some weathered blue on top. I'll then move on to painting the finer details of his surcoat, adding the white trim around the bottom and along the skirt, as well as the design running down the center and along the sides up to the middle. Finally, in lieu of all the filigree that I didn't want to try sculpting, I'll add that in by painting over the metal with some darker metallics in swirly motions to try and mimic the look. The majority of Iron Eye is in green, so I'll base coat his body armor, hood, and cape in a dark green, then paint his boots, pants, and quiver black and brown, before painting the big bow with a mahogany. The few metallic bits he has will get a steel top coat, and I'll paint the string of the bow with a khaki striped in a watery brown, while the strings of the bow can get some pale beige. Finally, Guardian's sporting a mostly dirty white outfit, while his chicken legs are black. I'll paint his furry torso and head brown and do the same for his belt, then I'll give the wings a brown wet blended with a gray to create a dark to light gradient. While the wings are drying, I'll give the various metallic bits of his armor a silver and steel top coat, doing the same thing for his battle axe before going back to his wings to give them a dry brushing with some light gray and off-white to pick out the sharper edges. Finally, I can paint his beak and eyes a muted yellow and add a touch of black to the tip of his beak before coming back with a darker metallic to add a bit of filigree to his armor in much the same way I did as Wilder. And just like that, in the space of 11.5 minutes, I've sculpted and painted 3 completely unique 50mm miniatures from start to finish. And that's just a taste of what you'll get when you subscribe to North of the Border. I'm not saying it's good, and I'm not saying it's educational. I'm certainly not saying it's satisfactory. But it is fast. Otherwise, all that's left to do then is make a base. I have this leftover lump of extra thick XPS foam that's just about the perfect size for what will become our sandy battle scene, so all I need to do now is cut it down to size. In a perfect world, I'd have one of them hot wire foam cutter knife things, but I don't, so I'll just have to make do with this sketchy Stanley knife the builders left here by accident. I'll saw the edges to roughly the width I want, then I can start cutting grids into the top of the foam, making slightly more angled cuts as I go until all the pieces start to fall out on their own. To harden up the surface and melt away some of the rougher cuts, I'll blast the top with my heat gun, then I can coat the surface in an initial layer of hole filler, which I've found can actually be used to effectively fill holes. The hole filler and foam's still a bit weak, so to prime it and protect it, I'll mix up some wood glue, black paint, and a bit of water to make a thick black tar that I can use to coat the entire foam block. Then once that's had a chance to properly dry, it's time to make some sand. This is sand-colored tile grout, and it's perfect. At this scale, normal sand is way too granular and ends up looking like rock, whereas this stuff is so fine that you can feel it coating the inside of your lungs and turning to cement the second you start breathing. I'll mix it up as per the directions I never bother reading, then I can slap it onto my foam base, spreading it out to cover every bit of the surface. Once it's neatly spread, I'll use the spatula to add little sandy waves into the top, and I can leave it for 24 hours to dry. With a nice solid base, I can figure out where Gladius is going to be standing, so I can add some more sandy grout beneath his feet in the surrounding area, then I'll dab at that with a paper towel to create the churned up sand where he's been stomping around, as well as add the furrow of pushed away sand where he swiped his sword through the earth. Once that's started to set, I can fit Gladius back in place and press his feet into the sand, as well as fit the sword into the furrow, building it up a bit more around the base of the sword. This will hold the sword in place, but I can still remove Gladius so I can give the sand a bit of extra color. This grout is a perfectly fine color, but I want to add a bit of variation to the sand, so I'll blast it with a slightly darker color from two sides, catching the dunes to create some shadows. Then I'll drill some holes into the grout around the sword and slip some lengths of acrylic rod down into them. A bit of heat from the hot gun will let me bend the rods into slightly wavy, flamey shapes, which I can use as the supports for the big gouts of hot glue fire I want to build on top. Once I've covered the rods in glue, I'll poke and prod the still melty glue to create some natural looking flamey licks, then I can add a few more little fires in the surrounding area before using my masking putty and plenty of masking tape to tape off everything that I don't want covered in fluorescent paints. Then I'll work my way along the flames, base coating with a bright fluorescent yellow to set the base tones before coming back with some oranges and reds to add the highlights and fire-appropriate variation. With my flames looking absolutely fire, I can peel the tape away and remove the masking putty to reveal my unblemished sand below. This of course needs some spooky glow-in-the-dark swirls as well, so I'll stand the base on its side and use the airbrush to add lots of swirls and spots and bits of fluorescent orange and yellow. Now with the base done, the last thing to do is make a big ethereal banner. I want the banner to be invisible except for the glowing orange filigree, so I'll mark out the shape of my banner on this thin sheet of acrylic, then cut off the excess. I can then peel away the plastic coating and set the banner on a white background so I can actually see what I'm doing, while I use some fluorescent orange to add the pattern to the banner in much the same way I did to make the golden filigree on Gladius's sword. To hang the banner, I'll make a stand by connecting some acrylic rod with UV resin, creating the rope with invisible fishing line, holding it all in place with more UV resin. A couple blobs on the tips will give the rod some shape, and I can attach the banner to the rod and create the little tassels hanging off the side of the banner by dripping UV resin over some tightly wound fishing line. I bent the banner with a little heat from the heat gun to make it look like it's blowing in the wind, and I can paint all the edges of the clear acrylic rod and fishing line with more fluorescent paint to help it glow in the dark. Finally, with that last puzzle piece in place, I can start assembling the scene, putting Gladius in place and adding a bit of clear tacky glue to his mouth so he's extra drooly. Then I can fit Iron Eye to the side, Wilder running up the front, and Guardian leaping off to the side. To make Guardian fly, I'll remove him from his base and cut away the wire so I can mount him on some acrylic rod. However, while making Guardian, I was using this reference photo, not realizing that hidden behind that big old shield is a little wonky wing. So I had to do a little emergency scalpel surgery to cut away and reposition the wing so it's appropriately bendy and broken, otherwise he can get mounted on his rod in the back and we can finally fit that banner in the background. And that's us done here, and onto the glamour shots. Big ol' thank you to Bandai Namco for sponsoring this video. Elden Ring Nightreign is out right now, so make sure you follow the link in the description below so you and 2 friends can see this big 3-headed good boy for yourself. And probably subsequently get eaten. And of course, a big thank you to my patrons of Patreon, and a special hey how are you to the newest of them. The Sisonian, Mandy Lancaster, Bonnie Wicks, Jared I made a Patreon just for North of the Border, James, Baggy Britches, Kevin Guthrie, WoW Classic Nerdy Girl, PRXT, Arrow the King, the Legend, the Old Bean, Dragonblade 22, Minty 995, Jordan Huey, Julian, Trashy Panda, and Bigfoot Bigger in Texas. You are the frustratingly intricate links of chain that keep this 3-headed dog of a channel from dropping its big flaming sword. Thanks again to Bandai Namco, and make sure you justify them sponsoring me by checking out the link below. Otherwise, we'll see you next time. Cheers.